You know, I was eventually going to get around to playing Rune Factory 4 since it was the only game in the series I hadn't played yet. I had played the other games in the series and they haven't really steered me wrong. For anyone who's been following the stuff that we cover, I'd even said that I would tackle Rune Factory 4 on the Nintendo 3DS back when I covered Rune Factory Tides of Destiny. However, once I heard that the game was coming out on the Nintendo Switch as Rune Factory 4 Special, I decided I'd wait for that version and cover it then. Rune Factory is a fantasy spin-off of the Harvest Moon / Story of Seasons series, and features your character exploring dungeons as well as fighting and befriending monsters, all on top of running a successful farm. For transparency, a copy of this game was provided to me courtesy of a PR network. Rune Factory 4 takes place in the land of Selphia, and you have the choice of choosing a male or female character. Each character has a default name, or you can self-insert and rename the character how you like, providing it's not more than 6 characters. Your character begins the game travelling on an airship heading towards Selphia with a glowing stone when you're attacked by some enemy soldiers. After fending them off, you get struck in the head, and as a result you lose your glowing stone as well as your memories. One of the soldiers accidentally knocks you off the airship, and your fall to the cold hard ground is interrupted when you instead fall on Ventuswil, the guardian of Selphia and one of the 4 native dragons of legend. Ventuswil and her attendants presume that you are the prince of the nearby kingdom here to live and help govern Selphia, and you're given a field to look after and taught the basics of the game. Things get a little bit more complicated when the real prince shows up, however you get to keep your position with his permission and your slow life begins. Following the basic Harvest Moon Story of Seasons formula, the game has growing and shipping goods as well as meeting and becoming friends with the townsfolk, possibly finding love and starting a family. Rune Factory 4 Special also introduces a newlywed mode detailing adventures that you have with your spouse, as well as additional stories as DLC to read about certain characters. The Rune Factory aspect, though, will have you exploring dungeons and fighting monsters, with you being able to tame some to help you on your fields, or to make produce that you can use or sell. But is the game any good? Find out in The Good. I like the characters the game has to offer. Each character has unique personalities as well as character flaws which make them stand out and in some cases make them more endearing. The game features town events which involve multiple characters in Selphia, and it also doubles as an opportunity to learn more about them. You can raise your friendship with characters by giving them gifts, especially things they like, or even with something as simple as talking to them every day. Eventually you can ask them to adventure with you, and for the main bachelors and bachelorettes, you can then confess your love to them and start dating. Unlike previous entries where the male character is more spoiled for choice, or in the first, Frontier and third games where the male character is the only option, Rune Factory 4 offers 6 bachelors and bachelorettes for the main character to choose from, and overcoming your love interest's major challenge is required to marry them. Characters tend to have their own schedules, and you'll find them in different parts of town each day. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to them and reading the conversations, and they definitely add to the game's charm. The game's combat isn't too different from when I played Tides of Destiny. Your character has several weapons available at their disposal, each with their advantages and disadvantages. You can even defeat enemies using your farm tools. Yes, the watering can is an instrument of destruction to low-level monsters. Much like the other games, monsters aren't killed, but in fact sent back to the forest beginnings, and the game makes gathering materials and growing crops instrumental to not only making money, but to also strengthen and enhance weapons, armour and accessories. The crafting and forging abilities in the game play a huge role, especially in the second and third arcs of the game where monsters start getting significantly stronger, and you'll want to make the most of them to survive. Materials and crops can increase the stats of your gear and provide additional effects such as inflicting statuses on enemies or protecting yourselves from them. You can even stack special effects from your gear by using them as part of the recipe to make new ones, providing that what you're making is the same type, so you can't give your sword the experience boost from a pendant. Your character can also equip abilities and magic which can deal damage or support you and your party at the cost of rune points or RP. Once you run out of RP, it will take a severe toll on your health, so raise that cooking skill so you have items to maintain your HP and RP when you explore. Thankfully, you can make use of the return spell to get home if you're stuck in a pinch, as that doesn't require RP. Your party members can also equip weapons and armour too, so you can make their gear, or do what I did and just give them your hand-me-downs. Monster taming is back, and unlike Tides of Destiny where you brush a monster into friendship and submission, you have to give the monsters gifts to recruit them. The bosses, once you've beaten them for the first time, are also recruitable, though instead of giving them any old thing, they are very particular on what they want. The game also has an emphasis on skills, so running around, farming and fighting will all raise your everyday skills which contribute to your overall stats, and finding the balance between farming, socialising and fighting is key to success. The order system was something I thought was pretty interesting too. As the Prince, you can issue out orders to help promote and benefit yourself in the town, such as throwing festivals or increasing how much you can store. After you beat the third arc and enter post-game, you'll also get more orders to choose from to challenge yourself, especially the post-game dungeon where the enemies are at least level 250 and higher, with deeper floors and stronger enemies as you clear it. I also like the exploration and experimentation that you can do in the game. Some places in the map are inaccessible unless certain conditions are met, or unless you have the right equipment, and they tend to have some pretty interesting stuff to reward you if you find them, such as the ability to grow dungeons. Even the way you grow crops can factor into things, as you can grow giant crops providing that the conditions are met and you use the right stuff. Just because the crop looks bigger doesn't necessarily mean that it's a giant crop. These little things kept the game fun for me, and I was always striving to do something new in the time I've spent with it. But it's not all sunshine and roses, so let's look at what wasn't so good in the bad. One issue I had with the game is the upscaling on backgrounds and item sprites, which to me looks pretty bad. It's not as noticeable when playing in handheld mode or if I'm further back from the TV, but it really shows up close and makes the character models stand out. I understand and acknowledge that the game was originally a Nintendo 3DS game, but even if you didn't redraw it, and with AI technology nowadays, you can achieve some pretty stunning results. While playing through Newlywed Mode, I had also discovered that they had made live 2D models out of some of the characters, notably you and the love interests, which to me actually looked pretty good. I would have been more than happy to wait longer for the game if the developers decided to update the main game and give everyone the live 2D treatment, or at the very least upscale or redo the backgrounds and sprites a little better. I feel this would have done the game more justice, especially given that this is supposed to be a more definitive version of the game. While the game does give you more of a reason to farm, and certainly handles the farming aspect a lot better than Tides of Destiny did, farming ultimately still takes a backseat in favour of combat and story. I found that my weapon usage, forging and crafting skills were all significantly higher than my farming, mining and woodcutting skills, and while I did enjoy the story, there wasn't a great benefit the farming aspect could put towards my progression in the game, with the exception of creating a shortcut and making certain minerals easier to obtain. Even so, just simply making better hammers more or less made the latter easier. I also found that luck also plays a big part of the game too. While I did struggle in the post-game dungeon, a weapon I'd picked up randomly essentially made that dungeon a pushover, as it boosted my damage output to absurd levels. Combine that with a high critical hit ratio and you'll be breezing through it in no time. Befriending monsters is a time-consuming and luck-based process too, as you won't always tame the monster from the first thing you give it, and it may even take you exhausting things from your inventory before you befriend it. You can combine the process along with the order to raise enemy levels to the thousands to choose one of the festivals involving your monsters battling the townfolk's monsters, as they magically become super good at festivals after the first year. Bosses will require items that take time or a lot of money to get, and whether you recruit them successfully or not is an exercise in itself. Thankfully, befriending normal monsters is a good way to get rid of a lot of the junk you accumulate in the game, and they'll help out on the farm if you keep being friendly to them. Some will give you materials, and when you take them out with you as companions, they can grow levels and get stronger too. Some monsters can even let you ride them, so you can in a sense control them directly. But at the end of the day, even recruiting them all comes down to how lucky you are. I don't have much else to complain about here, so it's about time I give the opinion. Rune Factory 4 is a solid entry in the series, and to me it rivals, or I could even say even beats Tides of Destiny in my rankings. It certainly handles some things better than Tides of Destiny did, such as the farming, and this is to be expected from the game that came out after it. Like other games in the Harvest Moon Story of Season series, I really grew fond of the characters, and like the other games in the Rune Factory series, I did like the combat and the freedom to explore and experiment. The issues I really had were minor and more cosmetic, and while the game does make farming take a back seat, you do get the quiet, peaceful moments where you can enjoy the farming aspects and talking to the other townsfolk. Once you beat Act 3, you're free to approach the game however you want, whether it's to fight or to farm. And personally, if you're into Harvest Moon, Story of Seasons and Stardew Valley, you'll like this game and others in the Rune Factory series. I'm glad that a fifth game was announced, since original developers Neverland went bankrupt and the fate of the series was up in the air. The Rune Factory as a series has great world building, with stuff in this game even referencing other games in the series, and I hope to see it do well and continue well into the future, much like Harvest Moon and Story of Seasons have. So with that, it's time for my rating. I would give Rune Factory 4 Special a Tyrant Turnip out of 10. A giant turnip to surpass giant turnips if you wanted to compare with the Tides of Destiny rating. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next Infinite Backlog review. If you enjoyed today's review, feel free to check out some of our other videos and subscribe for more. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram and our Facebook page. Once again, thank you for watching.